Okay, good morning 10 Hubble. Welcome to episode 1 of Mr. MALTBY'S home learning series. Today we're going to be looking at aerobic and anaerobic respiration. Before we get stuck into figure out what's going on with this chap on the floor, we're going to be doing a little bit of housekeeping. So just as a reminder, please make sure you've downloaded Microsoft Teams, because we're going to be using that to communicate with one another. I've also sent out some clear guidance on how lessons will work moving forward. Just a little reminder that lessons will be set every Monday with the work due the following Monday. I'll then release a YouTube video on the Tuesday, and then I'll be available for the rest of the week for discussion on Teams, etc. Okay, so as I said, we're going to be covering aerobic and anaerobic respiration. By now, before looking at this video, please make sure that you've done the pre-reading and the note-taking that was sent out on Go for Schools. We are going to also touch on anaerobic respiration. Your notes were mainly on aerobic respiration. We're going to touch on anaerobic respiration today as well, and cover that in more detail when we look at the effects of exercise next week. Okay, here we go. Lesson of the day. Before we get stuck in, we've got a couple of kind of quick fire questions, if they're going to show up on my screen. There we go. Quick fire questions. Here we go. So we're going to do some knowledge recall questions just to get us thinking, get us warming up. I'll show the questions. Here we go. So why is glucose used to produce 1 amino acids, 2 starch, 3 cellulose? So that's kind of focusing around the function of those molecules. Question 4, what is the relative mass of an electron? And question 5, what is the charge of a neutron? So just a couple of knowledge recall questions to get us warmed up. So if you want to pause the video and have a go, and then I'll go through the answers. So, of course, amino acids are the building blocks of proteins. We're going to sort of revisit that today, thinking about what glucose is used for. So, amino acids as a monomer, producing as the building blocks for proteins, the polymers. So, question 2, starch obviously is a storage molecule. It is insoluble, making it a good storage molecule. Glucose is used to build cell walls in plants. And of course, question 4 and 5, our relative mass of electron is 0, and charge of a neutron is also 0, no charge. So some good warm-up questions there. Linking to the specification for today's lesson, you can have a peruse through that in your own time, just to be clear of what we need to cover in today's lesson. So by the end of the lesson, we should be able to define aerobic and anaerobic respiration. We need to be able to recall the word and symbol equation for both processes, and compare and contrast the 2 forms of respiration, which we're going to do towards the end of today. So, first of all, have we ever got a stitch? I know I certainly have. What caused that? What are you doing? Generally, we're going to be exercising. And today, then, we're going to be thinking about the different types of respiration, aerobic and anaerobic respiration, the process of breaking down glucose to release energy, and energy is clearly needed for exercise. When we have an incomplete breakdown of glucose in anaerobic respiration, we can have something built up called lactic acid, and we're going to explore this. And actually, if we've ever got a stitch, that is the cause of a stitch. It's a build-up of a waste product called lactic acid. So just to kind of put some context into the lesson, and we should be able to return to that later to explain that and think about the science behind that. So if we want to do a quick demonstration, of muscle fatigue, you can do this in your own time. Okay, it's kind of a clench and unclench kind of exercise where you're going to count how many times you can do this before your arm feels tired and begins to ache, and you can write down your results. Maybe you want to compare with some people in your household to see who, of course, is the most hench. What we should see, though, of course, that you'll get some muscle fatigue due to the build-up of lactic acid. And again, we can use this demonstration and understand the science behind that. So that's a demonstration you can do afterwards. So first of all, some common misconceptions around respiration. We often hear people saying that respiration is breathing, and it certainly is not. Okay, they are not the same thing. What's the difference then? Okay, so breathing, well, let's demonstrate that now. So if we can take a nice deep breath in through our nose and a nice deep exhalation out through our mouth, that is breathing. That is gaseous exchange. Okay, inhalation and exhalation, that's what breathing is. That's all breathing is. Respiration is simply the breaking down of glucose to release energy. Now, of course, we're going to be thinking about how oxygen plays a role in that and how we get rid of the CO2 by breathing, but breathing and respiration are not the same thing. Breathing is just the exchange of gases. Respiration is breaking down glucose to release energy. Really important that we don't have that misconception. It drives science teachers insane. So another misconception that we often hear is that plants don't carry out respiration. They do. Okay, yes, they carry out photosynthesis. Okay, they carry out photosynthesis to make their own food, to make glucose, using energy from the sun. But of course, plants are living. Plants are living organisms. They also carry out respiration. Okay, they break down the glucose to release energy, and that energy is used for various processes that we're going to come to, and have various uses for that glucose, which we'll come to later on. So let's remind ourselves then, in terms of cell biology, the site of respiration. Pause the video now, see if you can recall that. And of course, we know that the site of respiration is indeed the mitochondria, and we can look at evidence for this, by looking at cells that have lots of mitochondria. We know that highly active cells, such as muscle cells, such as a sperm cell that requires a lot of energy to move, well, they have a higher number of mitochondria. We know that mitochondria have a folding membrane, okay, which provides a larger surface area for enzymes to work. We know that respiration is an enzyme-controlled reaction. So we do need to remind ourselves of this kind of cell biology behind this. And of course, in thinking about aerobic and anaerobic respiration, well, aerobic respiration, of course, happens in the mitochondria, but we also need to think about the site of anaerobic respiration. We can link this to the kind of the diagram that's up on the screen here. So what I'd like you to do at this point, okay, having made a couple of notes from the previous slide, is to draw this diagram down to remind ourselves of the link to cell biology here. So we know that cytoplasm, that's where the enzymes are made, and this is the location for anaerobic respiration, in the cytoplasm of cells. For aerobic respiration, that is specifically in the mitochondria, the organelles that are found inside the cells. So then we're starting to think about the different sites of respiration within the cell itself, in terms of aerobic being in the mitochondria and anaerobic being in the cytoplasm. So coming on to now thinking about the difference between aerobic and anaerobic respiration, and if we haven't got a title, we should have a title by now with a date, and we're just going to get through the basics, okay, and starting to think about the difference between aerobic and anaerobic respiration. First of all, introducing our word equation. So glucose plus oxygen is carbon dioxide plus water plus energy. We'll come to the plus energy bit in a bit more detail in a minute, okay, because there's various there's a key difference between aerobic and anaerobic respiration in terms of the energy that's released there. So we do this normally as we walk around in our day-to-day activities. We are continually respiring aerobically. So do all animals and plants. Okay. This is the reason why we breathe in oxygen. Okay. We breathe in the oxygen because in aerobic respiration, it is a complete breakdown of glucose in the presence of oxygen. Okay. To then release the energy and carbon dioxide and water. So if we think about aerobic, we can think with oxygen. We know there's oxygen in air. That's sometimes, I guess, a good way to try and remember it. The other form then is anaerobic, which just means without oxygen. Okay, so on to anaerobic respiration. Here then you can see the left-hand side of our word equation. There is no oxygen there. Okay, in terms of our reactants and our products. And here we again have the release of energy, but we have this nasty waste product, lactic acid, which can build up in our muscles. And we'll look at that in more detail next week. In terms of some key differences between aerobic and anaerobic respiration, apart from the fact that aerobic is with oxygen, anaerobic is without, well, we can think about this energy that's released. Okay, so release about 5% of the energy released by aerobic respiration per molecule of glucose. So a lot less energy is released in anaerobic respiration because it's the incomplete breakdown of glucose. And we see here in brackets here that for aerobic respiration we produce 36 ATP molecules compared to 2 or 3 for anaerobic. Now, if you're looking to do A-level, you'll go into more detail about ATP. At this point, let's just think about ATP as like the currency for energy, in a way. ATP can then be used in various cellular reactions. And we know that in aerobic respiration, approximately 36 ATP molecules compared to 2 or 3 made in anaerobic respiration. So if you're exercising really, really hard and you can't get enough oxygen into your body to break down that glucose aerobically, then we'll start to respire anaerobically. Okay, essentially this skips a large chunk of reactions and you break down the glucose much quicker, but in exchange you get less ATP molecules for that. So when we're respiring anaerobically, it's during strenuous exercise. And we think back to the chap who was a sprinter at the beginning of the lesson, certainly the sprinter would be respiring anaerobically. However, it does cause a build-up of lactic acid, as we said, and this can cause the muscle pain and stitches. And when we look at the effects of exercise next week, we'll come into that in a bit more detail. Now, we do need to know the symbol equations, okay, for both processes. We should know that our glucose molecule is represented as C6H12O6. We should know that from our photosynthesis equation. And at this point, let's just have a go and attempt to write the symbol equations. Okay, we've got a little helpful hint here that lactic acid is half a glucose molecule. So I'd like you to write down the word equations there, okay, and just have a go. Okay, have a go, pause the video and see if you can write down the symbol equations. Okay, so there we have it, our word and symbol equation for both aerobic and anaerobic respiration. Now, usually we do a little demonstration at this point, thinking about how we can demonstrate that CO2 is actually released, and we can do this using the Huff-Puff demo. Essentially what we do is set up some apparatus and we breathe into some lime water solution, and what eventually happens is the lime water turns cloudy, and this is kind of evidence that we are releasing the CO2 as a waste product. And the reason why it turns cloudy is fairly simple chemistry. Calcium hydroxide reacts with the CO2 that you're breathing out to form the insoluble calcium carbonate in solution with the water. So I don't think you'll be able to get your hands on any lime water, but when we're back in the classroom, perhaps we'll be able to give this a go and demonstrate this practical. So you would have made some notes already about what we actually need the energy for. So we go through this process of breaking down glucose to release energy. What are we using that energy for? Okay, at this point, I'd like you to pause the video and try to recall that from your notes. In a minute, you're going to make some additional notes in your book and do some drawing. You know how much I love drawing. So let's pause the video now and see if we can recall what the energy is used for. So of course, as we break down the glucose molecule to release the energy, we use that energy for movement, for exercise, to keep warm. We're going to come on to how that enables us to keep warm, thinking about respiration as an exothermic reaction. And of course, making larger molecules from smaller ones, we know that building bonds requires energy. So in order to make, for example, new proteins from our building blocks of amino acids, it requires energy. Okay. So what I'd like you to do, if you go to your notes then you've made from the textbook, I'd like you to go back to those notes and to draw some images to help represent that information, to help remember why and what the energy is needed for. Okay, so thinking then about aerobic and anaerobic respiration in terms of the type of reaction. So we know from chemistry, most chemicals will break up or decompose if they're heated strongly enough. So this means that energy is needed to break chemical bonds, an endothermic process. And because bond breaking is endothermic, bond making must therefore be exothermic in as much as it will require energy. This means that energy is released when chemical bonds are made. Now, having said that, I'd like to think now, do we think that respiration is an endothermic process? Okay. Does it require energy? Or is it an exothermic? Does it release energy? Of course, we know that aerobic respiration is an exothermic reaction. Energy is released. Okay, so now we're thinking about some kind of some application and thinking about fermenters. Okay, what links this with anaerobic respiration? Well, of course, yeast. Okay, yeast cells can also do anaerobic respiration, and this process is called fermentation. Fermentation is really, really important for making beer and wine. Of course, yeast will break down the glucose to instead, this time, the products are ethanol and carbon dioxide, or it's been weirdly spelled there. Little typo there, carbon dioxide. So the ethanol then is the alcohol that then is in our beer and wine. So that's just kind of like a practical application there for an anaerobic respiration. So what you're going to do now is you're going to pause the video, and what I'd like you to do is to have a go at this 3-mark exam question, and then we'll have a little peruse through the mark scheme just to finish off. So describe the process. Okay, I guess you guys can have a little subheading, just exam question in your exercise books. Describe the process of respiration which takes place in human beings when oxygen is not available, and give an effect. Okay, so without oxygen. So at this point you can pause the video. Okay, you can have a look back through your notes, have a go at writing an answer. Last little thing then for you guys to do, having looked at the mark scheme and had a go at that question, is for you to then think about this comparison. So we need to be able to compare aerobic and anaerobic respiration. I want you to draw a Venn diagram, okay, to then compare the processes. What are the similarities? What are the differences? And probably take about half a page to draw this Venn diagram to compare the similarities and the differences of aerobic and anaerobic respiration. Just to finish off. At this point you can pause the video and have a go at that task. So there we have it. Just to finish things off, we know that aerobic respiration uses oxygen. More energy is released in that kind of currency form of ATP, 36 ATP molecules, and does not produce lactic acid, that nasty byproduct that gives us the stitch. Both release energy, both use glucose, okay, both break down glucose to release energy, and occurs in animals and plants. Really important that we remember that. And of course, anaerobic respiration does not use oxygen, it is without oxygen. Less energy is released, 2 to 3 kind of ATP molecules per glucose molecule, produces lactic acid in animals, and produces alcohol in fermentation, which is very useful for making delicious beers and wine. Okay, so thank you very much, 10 Hubble. That is the end of this first video of Mr. Maltby's home learning series. What I'd like to follow then is if we can go on to Teams and we can discuss any of the work. I'll be available all week. Don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe.